Elena Martinez pushed her cleaning cart through the marble corridors of Wellington Enterprises at exactly 5:47 a.m., just as she had every weekday for the past 3 years. The 42-story tower pierced the Manhattan skyline like a steel and glass monument to corporate power, its windows reflecting the early morning sun across the city below. Inside these walls, deals worth millions were struck daily, careers were made and destroyed with a single phone call, and fortunes changed hands faster than most people could count to 10. But Elena knew none of this mattered to her. She was invisible here, a ghost who moved through the building before the real people arrived. Her world consisted of empty trash cans, dusty surfaces, and the quiet hum of vacuum cleaners echoing through abandoned hallways. She preferred it this way. The solitude gave her time to think, to plan, and, most importantly, to worry about the things that actually mattered in her life. Her daughter Sophia was turning 8 next week, and Elena had been saving every spare penny for months to buy her the art supplies she desperately wanted. Sophia had inherited her father's artistic eye, though he had been gone for 4 years now, leaving Elena to raise their daughter alone on a cleaning lady's salary in one of the most expensive cities in the world. The irony wasn't lost on her that she spent her days maintaining the luxurious offices of people who probably spent more on lunch than she earned in a month. Elena's routine was precise, born from years of experience and the constant fear of losing the job that barely kept her and Sophia afloat. She started on the lower floors, working her way up through accounting, human resources, and the various departments filled with cubicles where ambitious young professionals climbed their way toward the executive floors. Each level brought her closer to the realm of the untouchables, the executives whose offices occupied the top floors and whose lives seemed as distant from hers as the stars. On the 38th floor, Elena always moved more carefully. This was where the senior executives worked, people whose decisions affected thousands of employees and whose names appeared in financial newspapers. Their offices were larger, their furniture more expensive, and their trash cans somehow seemed to judge her as she emptied them. But, even here, Elena was just a shadow, acknowledged only by the occasional security guard who nodded politely as she passed. The real challenge came on floors 39 through 42. This was the executive level, where the air itself seemed thinner and more expensive. Here, the carpets were deeper, the artwork was original, and the silence was so profound it felt almost sacred. Elena had learned to move like a whisper through these halls, never disturbing the carefully maintained atmosphere of power and privilege. But it was the 42nd floor that truly intimidated her. This was the domain of Marcus Wellington III, the 34-year-old CEO who had inherited the company from his father and transformed it from a successful regional business into a global empire. Elena had seen him exactly 3 times in 3 years, always from a distance, always surrounded by a small army of assistants and advisors who moved with him like planets orbiting the sun. Marcus Wellington III was everything Elena was not. Where she was invisible, he commanded attention simply by entering a room. Where she struggled to pay rent on a cramped apartment in Queens, he lived in a penthouse that overlooked Central Park. Where she counted pennies to buy her daughter's school supplies, he signed contracts worth more money than most people would see in 10 lifetimes. They existed in the same building but might as well have lived on different planets. Elena had heard the stories about Marcus from the other cleaning staff who had worked the building longer than she had. He was brilliant, they said, but cold as winter steel. He had never been married, rarely smiled, and treated his employees with the detached efficiency of a machine. Some whispered that he had fired entire departments with the same emotion most people reserved for ordering coffee. Others claimed he worked 18-hour days and slept in his office more often than he went home. What Elena didn't know was that Marcus Wellington III was the loneliest man in Manhattan. Marcus stared out the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office as the city awakened below him. From his vantage point 42 floors above the street, the people looked like ants, scurrying about their insignificant lives with purpose he couldn't comprehend. He had arrived at the office at 4:30 a.m., as was his custom, preferring the quiet hours before the building filled with the noise and chaos of human ambition. His office was a monument to success, decorated with awards, photographs of himself with world leaders, and art pieces worth more than most people's homes. The mahogany desk that dominated the room had belonged to his grandfather, the founder of Wellington Enterprises, and his father before him. It was a symbol of legacy, of the weight of expectation that had shaped Marcus's entire life. But, success, Marcus had learned, was a cold companion. It demanded everything and gave nothing back except the hunger for more. He had sacrificed relationships, friendships, and any semblance of a normal life on the altar of achievement. At 34, he was one of the youngest CEOs in the Fortune 500, but he couldn't remember the last time he had laughed spontaneously or felt genuine joy about anything. His days followed the same ruthless pattern. Meetings from dawn to dusk, conference calls with international partners, decisions that affected thousands of lives made with the clinical precision of a surgeon. He consumed information like a computer processes data, efficiently and without emotion. Profit margins, market projections, and acquisition targets were the language he spoke fluently, but the simple art of human connection had become foreign to him. Marcus had inherited more than just a company from his father. He had inherited a worldview that measured everything in terms of profit and loss. People were resources to be optimized, relationships were transactions to be managed, and emotions were weaknesses to be suppressed. It was a philosophy that had made him incredibly wealthy but profoundly empty. His personal assistant, Janet, had been with the company for 15 years and was one of the few people brave enough to speak honestly to him. She often worried about his isolation, his inability to form meaningful connections with anyone. She had watched him grow from an eager young heir into a successful but hollow man, and it broke her heart to see how completely he had withdrawn from the world of human feeling. The irony was that Marcus was surrounded by people all day long, but he was utterly alone. His board meetings were attended by executives who feared him, his social events were filled with people who wanted something from him, and his rare romantic encounters were with women more interested in his wealth than his character. He had learned to trust no one completely, to keep his guard up at all times, and to never show weakness in a world that would exploit any vulnerability. But isolation had a price, and Marcus was paying it every day. He suffered from insomnia, finding it impossible to quiet his mind long enough to rest. He ate most of his meals alone at his desk, mechanical consumption of fuel for a machine that never stopped running. He had no hobbies, no interests outside of work, and no dreams beyond the next quarterly report. His penthouse apartment was as cold and impersonal as his office, filled with expensive furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum rather than a home. He had no photographs of family or friends, no mementos from happy times, no evidence that a human being actually lived there. It was the perfect space for a man who had forgotten how to be human. The closest Marcus came to genuine emotion was anger, and even that was carefully controlled and strategically deployed. He was famous for his ice-cold demeanor during negotiations, his ability to remain calm under pressure, and his talent for making difficult decisions without being swayed by sentiment. These qualities had made him incredibly successful in business, but they had also made him incredibly lonely in life. As Elena worked her way through the building that morning, she was unaware that the man whose office she would clean in a few hours was struggling with demons as real as her own financial worries. While she worried about paying rent and buying Sophia's birthday present, Marcus struggled with a different kind of poverty, the kind that no amount of money could cure. Their worlds were about to collide in the most unexpected way, triggered by a simple gesture that would change everything. Elena had no way of knowing that her small act of kindness would crack open the carefully constructed walls around Marcus's heart. And Marcus had no idea that the invisible woman who cleaned his office was about to teach him the most important lesson of his life. As the morning progressed and the building filled with employees starting their day, Elena continued her methodical journey upward, floor by floor, toward an encounter that would transform two lives forever. She moved through her routine with the same careful precision as always, unaware that today would be different. Today, she would become visible to the one person who needed to see her most. The stage was set for a collision between two worlds, a meeting between invisible kindness and untouchable power. Neither Elena nor Marcus knew it yet, but their carefully ordered lives were about to be turned upside down by something as simple as a birthday card and as profound as genuine human caring. In a city where millions of people lived side by side without ever truly seeing each other, two souls were about to discover that the greatest distances aren't measured in floors or bank accounts, but in the space between one heart and another. And, sometimes, it takes just one moment of authentic connection to bridge even the widest gaps. Elena's hands trembled slightly as she rode the elevator to the 42nd floor that Tuesday morning. Today was different because today was Marcus Wellington III's birthday, though she was certain he had no idea she knew this information. She had discovered it quite by accident 2 weeks earlier when she was emptying his wastebasket and noticed a torn piece of expensive stationery with "Br 15th birthday celebration" written in elegant script. The rest had been shredded, but those few words had stuck in her mind. The discovery had haunted Elena in ways she couldn't quite explain. Here was a man who seemed to have everything, yet she had never seen evidence of anyone celebrating him as a person rather than as a business asset. In 3 years of cleaning his office, she had never seen personal cards, family photos, or any indication that Marcus Wellington III existed outside of his corporate identity. The realization that even the wealthiest person in the building might spend his birthday alone had touched something deep in Elena's heart. Elena understood loneliness in a way that transcended social class. She knew what it felt like to be surrounded by people yet feel completely isolated. She knew the ache of celebrating milestones with no one to share them with, the quiet desperation of pretending that being alone was a choice rather than a circumstance. Her own birthdays since her husband's death had been quiet affairs, marked only by Sophia's handmade cards and the bittersweet awareness that life continued to move forward regardless of who was there to witness it. The idea of making Marcus a birthday card had come to her gradually, like a seed that had been planted in her subconscious and slowly grown into something she couldn't ignore. At first, she had dismissed it as foolish. What could someone like her possibly offer to someone like him? But the thought persisted, growing stronger each day as she went about her cleaning routine and imagined him sitting alone in his magnificent office on his birthday, surrounded by luxury but devoid of genuine human connection. Elena had spent 3 evenings after Sophia had gone to bed working on the card at their small kitchen table. She wasn't artistic like her daughter, but she poured her heart into every carefully chosen word and simple decoration. The card itself was nothing special, purchased from a dollar store near her apartment, but she had transformed it with her own additions. She had written a message that came from the deepest part of her soul, words that she hoped might remind this isolated man that someone in the world saw him as more than just a name on a building. The message was simple but profound: "Dear Mr. Wellington, today marks another year of your life, and I wanted you to know that your existence matters. Even though we've never spoken, I've observed your dedication and the long hours you spend here. You work so hard to take care of everyone else through your leadership. I hope today brings you some joy and that you know someone is thinking of you with kindness. Happy birthday. From someone who cares, Elena M." She had debated whether to sign her full name, ultimately deciding that her first initial and last initial felt appropriate while still maintaining the professional boundary that existed between them. She had no expectations beyond hoping that perhaps, for just a moment, Marcus Wellington III might feel less alone on his birthday. As the elevator rose toward the executive level, Elena's heart pounded with an intensity that surprised her. She had faced many challenges in her life: poverty, single motherhood, the death of her husband, the daily struggle to maintain dignity while working in a world where she was largely invisible, but somehow this simple act of kindness felt more terrifying than any of those trials. She was crossing an invisible line, stepping outside the carefully defined boundaries of her role as a cleaning lady. The 42nd floor was silent as Elena entered Marcus's outer office area. His assistant Janet wouldn't arrive for another 2 hours, and the executive level maintained an almost church-like quiet during these early morning hours. Elena went about her usual routine with automatic precision, but her awareness of the birthday card in her apron pocket made every movement feel significant. She cleaned Janet's desk area first, taking extra care to arrange everything perfectly. Janet had always been kind to the cleaning staff, one of the few executives who remembered their names and asked about their families. Elena respected her and didn't want to do anything that might create problems for the woman who served as Marcus's primary gatekeeper. When she finally entered Marcus's private office, Elena was struck once again by the sheer scale of the space. The room was larger than her entire apartment, with windows that offered a commanding view of Manhattan stretching to the horizon. The early morning light filtered through the glass, casting long shadows across the Persian rug and highlighting the expensive artwork that decorated the walls. Marcus's desk sat in the center of the room like a throne, its polished mahogany surface reflecting the city lights beyond the windows. The desk was immaculately organized, with documents arranged in precise stacks, expensive pens lined up like soldiers, and a computer monitor that never seemed to be turned off. Everything about the space spoke of power, control, and absolute order. Elena cleaned the office with her usual meticulous attention to detail, but her movements felt different today. She found herself noticing details she had never paid attention to before. The way the morning light created patterns on the wall. The subtle scent of expensive cologne that lingered in the air. The complete absence of any personal items that might indicate the office belonged to a human being rather than a machine. As she dusted the bookshelves lined with business texts and legal volumes, Elena thought about the man who spent most of his waking hours in this beautiful but sterile environment. She tried to imagine what it would be like to have so much responsibility, to make decisions that affected thousands of people, to carry the weight of such enormous expectations. The pressure must be crushing, she realized, even for someone who had been born into wealth and privilege. The moment of truth came when Elena finished all her other tasks and approached Marcus's desk to empty the wastebasket and dust the surface. The birthday card in her pocket seemed to burn against her leg, its presence both comforting and terrifying. She stood there for a long moment, looking at the imposing desk and the high-backed leather chair where Marcus would sit in just a few hours to begin another day of corporate warfare. Elena's hands shook as she slowly pulled the card from her pocket. In the grand scheme of Marcus Wellington III's life, this small gesture was probably insignificant. He might not even notice it, or worse, he might be offended by what he could perceive as inappropriate behavior from an employee. But Elena had learned from her own struggles that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness could mean the difference between hope and despair. She placed the card carefully in the center of the desk, positioning it where Marcus would be sure to see it when he arrived. The simple white envelope looked tiny and insignificant against the vast expanse of polished wood, but to Elena it represented something profound. It was a bridge thrown across the chasm that separated their worlds, a declaration that human dignity transcended social boundaries, and a reminder that even the most powerful people needed to know that someone cared about them as individuals. After placing the card, Elena stepped back and looked at it one final time. In her heart, she said a small prayer that her gesture would be received in the spirit it was intended, not as an intrusion or presumption, but as a genuine expression of human compassion. Then, she finished her cleaning routine, gathered her supplies, and left the office exactly as she always did, as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed, though neither Elena nor Marcus knew it yet. Marcus arrived at his office 3 hours later, following his usual morning routine of reviewing overnight reports from international markets and preparing for the day's marathon of meetings. He moved through his outer office with the focused intensity of a man who had trained himself to think of nothing but work from the moment he woke up until he finally collapsed into bed each night. He entered his private office and strode directly to his desk, his mind already focused on the acquisition deal that would dominate his morning. It took him several seconds to notice the white envelope sitting in the exact center of his desk blotter. He stopped abruptly, his business-focused thoughts scattered by this unexpected anomaly in his carefully ordered world. Marcus stared at the envelope for a long moment, his mind racing through possibilities. His assistant Janet was extremely protective of his privacy and would never allow unauthorized mail to reach his desk. Security was tight throughout the building, making it unlikely that anyone could have accessed his office without proper clearance. The envelope bore no return address, no corporate logo, no indication of its origin except his name written in simple block letters across the front. With the caution of a man who had learned to be suspicious of anything unexpected, Marcus opened the envelope and withdrew the birthday card. The front featured a simple design of balloons and the words, "Happy Birthday," in cheerful colors. It was the kind of inexpensive card that could be purchased at any corner store, completely out of place in his world of luxury and privilege. But it was the handwritten message inside that stopped Marcus's world completely. He read the words once, then, again, then, a third time, his analytical mind struggling to process what he was seeing. Someone knew it was his birthday. Someone had taken the time to buy a card, write a personal message, and, somehow place it on his desk. Someone who signed herself only as Elena M. cared enough about him to acknowledge his existence as a human being rather than just a corporate entity. Marcus sank into his leather chair, the birthday card still in his hands, and felt something crack open inside his chest. When was the last time anyone had wished him happy birthday without expecting something in return? When had anyone last thought of him as a person worthy of kindness rather than a business opportunity to be exploited? His birthdays for the past decade had been marked only by obligatory acknowledgments from his board of directors, expensive gifts from business associates hoping to curry favor, and elaborate parties thrown by his public relations team to enhance his company's image. But this simple card, with its heartfelt message and genuine warmth, touched something in Marcus that had been buried for so long he had forgotten it existed. The fact that he didn't know who Elena M. was made the gesture even more remarkable. This wasn't someone seeking favor or advancement. This was a person who had somehow learned of his birthday and had taken the time to acknowledge it out of pure human decency. The realization that such selfless kindness still existed in his world of calculated transactions was both humbling and overwhelming. Marcus found himself reading the message again and again, each word resonating with an impact that seemed disproportionate to its simplicity. Your existence matters. When was the last time anyone had expressed such a sentiment to him? Someone who cares. Who was this mysterious Elena M., and why did she care about a man she had presumably never even met? For the first time in years, Marcus Wellington III felt seen not as a CEO, not as a wealthy heir, not as a powerful decision-maker, but simply as a human being worthy of compassion and consideration. The feeling was so foreign, so unexpected, that he didn't know how to process it. All his analytical skills, all his business acumen, all his experience in reading people's motives seemed inadequate to understand this simple act of kindness. As he sat alone in his magnificent office, holding a dollar store birthday card that would have been unremarkable anywhere else in the world, Marcus felt the first crack in the armor he had built around his heart. He didn't know who Elena M. was, but her words had reached across the vast distance of their different worlds to remind him that somewhere in his building, someone saw him as more than just a name on a door. The card would change everything, though Marcus couldn't possibly know that yet. It was the first domino to fall in a sequence of events that would transform his understanding of what truly mattered in life. But, for now, he simply sat in wonder, holding the first genuine gift he had received in years, and feeling something he had almost forgotten was possible. He was feeling truly grateful, and, for the first time in a very long time, he was not alone on his birthday. Marcus Wellington III spent the rest of his birthday in a state of distraction that was completely foreign to his normally laser-focused existence. The birthday card sat on his desk throughout the day like a small beacon of humanity in his sterile corporate world, and he found his eyes drawn to it during every meeting, phone call, and decision-making session. His staff noticed the change immediately, though none dared to comment on their CEO's unusual behavior. During the quarterly review meeting that morning, Marcus caught himself staring out the window instead of analyzing profit margins. When his CFO asked for his opinion on a potential merger, Marcus had to ask him to repeat the question, something that had never happened before in his professional life. His assistant Janet watched with growing concern as the man famous for his unwavering focus seemed to drift in and out of conversations like a ship without an anchor. The card had awakened something in Marcus that he had thought was permanently dormant. For years, he had prided himself on his ability to compartmentalize emotions, to think purely in terms of logic and strategy. But, Elena M's simple words had bypassed all his intellectual defenses and spoken directly to a part of his soul he had forgotten existed. The realization that someone in his building cared about his well-being as a human being rather than as a business asset was both thrilling and terrifying. As the day progressed, Marcus found himself thinking about Elena M., with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Who was she? How did she know it was his birthday? Why had she taken the risk of leaving him a personal message when such an action could potentially jeopardize her position with the company? The mystery consumed him in a way that no business challenge ever had. By late afternoon, Marcus had made a decision that would have seemed impossible just 24 hours earlier. He was going to find Elena M. and thank her personally for her kindness. The logical part of his mind warned him that such an action was inappropriate, potentially problematic from a human resources perspective, and completely outside the boundaries of normal CEO behavior. But, for the first time in his adult life, Marcus found himself caring more about following his heart than following protocol. He started his investigation with Janet, who had been with the company long enough to know virtually every employee by name. When he asked her about Elena M., however, Janet's face showed genuine confusion. She went through her mental roster of all the Elenas in the company, but none of them seemed likely candidates for such a personal gesture toward the CEO. There's Elena Rodriguez in accounting, Janet offered, but she's been with us for less than 6 months and works exclusively with the regional division. I can't imagine how she would know about your birthday. There's also Elena Vasquez in human resources, but she's currently on maternity leave and hasn't been in the building for 2 months. Marcus felt his first surge of frustration, but it only strengthened his resolve. If Elena M. wasn't among the regular office staff, then she had to work in some other capacity within the building. He thought about the card's simple design and heartfelt message, the way it had been placed carefully in the center of his desk, and the fact that whoever left it had access to his private office. The realization hit him like a thunderbolt. The cleaning staff. It had to be someone from the cleaning crew who worked in the building during the early morning hours when security was lighter and offices were empty. This Elena M. was someone who had been invisibly moving through his world for who knows how long, someone he had never noticed but who had somehow learned enough about him to care about his birthday. The thought both humbled and excited Marcus. He had always prided himself on his awareness of business details, his ability to notice important patterns and connections that others missed. But he had been completely blind to the human beings who maintained his environment, who ensured that his workspace was clean and organized, who enabled his productivity without ever being acknowledged for their contribution. Marcus asked Janet to contact the building management company that handled cleaning services for Wellington Enterprises. Within an hour, he had the names and basic information for every member of the cleaning staff who had access to the executive floors. There, on the list of employees who worked the early morning shift, was Elena Martinez. Elena Martinez. 41 years old. Employed by Sparkle Clean Services for 3 years. Assigned to floors 38 through 42 of the Wellington Enterprises building. Single mother of 1 daughter. Clean employment record with no disciplinary actions or complaints. But, the basic facts on the employment record told Marcus nothing about who Elena Martinez really was, why she had chosen to reach out to him, or what had motivated her unprecedented act of kindness. The more he learned about her professional background, the more he realized how little he knew about her as a person. Marcus spent the evening researching everything he could about Elena Martinez, using all the resources at his disposal to build a picture of her life. What he discovered both impressed and saddened him. Elena was a woman who had faced enormous challenges with remarkable resilience. She had lost her husband 4 years earlier in a workplace accident and had been raising her daughter Sophia alone ever since. The financial records that Marcus could access legally showed a woman living on the absolute edge of poverty. Elena's salary from the cleaning company was barely above minimum wage, and her monthly expenses consumed almost every penny she earned. She lived in a modest apartment in Queens, took public transportation to work, and had no savings account or investments of any kind. Yet this woman, who struggled to make ends meet every month, had taken the time and expense to buy him a birthday card and write him a personal message of kindness. The contrast between her financial struggles and her emotional generosity struck Marcus with the force of a revelation. Here was someone who had every reason to be bitter about the inequalities of life, yet had chosen to extend compassion to someone she perceived as lonely despite his wealth and power. The more Marcus learned about Elena Martinez, the more he realized how wrong he had been about so many things. He had always believed that success was measured in dollars and achievements, that happiness came from accumulating wealth and power, that personal connections were luxuries he couldn't afford to pursue. But Elena, who had none of his material advantages, had demonstrated a richness of spirit that made his own life seem hollow by comparison. Marcus made another decision that would have shocked anyone who knew him. He was going to meet Elena Martinez personally, not as a CEO investigating an employee, but as a human being thanking another human being for an act of unexpected kindness. He had no idea how such a meeting would unfold, what he would say to her, or how she would react to discovering that her anonymous gesture had been traced back to her. But Marcus knew he had to try. For the first time in years, he felt a connection to another person that wasn't based on business interests or social obligations. Elena Martinez had seen something in him worth caring about, and he owed it to both of them to explore what that connection might mean. The challenge was arranging a meeting that wouldn't intimidate Elena or put her job at risk. Marcus understood enough about workplace dynamics to know that a request from the CEO to meet with a cleaning lady would likely terrify her and potentially create problems with her supervisors. He needed to find a way to approach her that felt natural and safe, not threatening or inappropriate. After much consideration, Marcus decided to adjust his schedule so that he would arrive at the office early enough to encounter Elena during her normal cleaning routine. It would appear casual, a chance meeting between two people who happened to be in the building at the same time. He could thank her for the card, perhaps learn a little more about her, and see whether the connection he felt was mutual or simply a product of his own emotional desperation. The plan seemed simple, but Marcus found himself nervous in a way he hadn't experienced since his first board meeting as CEO. Business negotiations never fazed him, confrontations with hostile competitors were just part of the job, and speaking to rooms full of powerful executives was as natural as breathing. But the thought of having a genuine conversation with Elena Martinez filled him with an anxiety that was both thrilling and terrifying. Marcus realized that he had no idea how to talk to someone without an agenda, how to connect with another person simply because he wanted to know them better. His entire adult life had been spent in conversations designed to achieve specific outcomes, to win negotiations, to close deals, to maintain strategic advantages. The concept of talking to someone just to understand them as a human being was so foreign that he felt like he was preparing for a mission to another planet. But Elena Martinez had opened a door in his heart that had been locked for years, and Marcus was determined to walk through it, regardless of where it might lead. He spent the evening planning his early arrival at the office, rehearsing what he might say, and trying to imagine how Elena would react when she realized that her anonymous act of kindness had been discovered. What Marcus didn't anticipate was how much this encounter would change him, or how Elena Martinez would prove to be not just the person who had sent him a birthday card, but the teacher who would show him what he had been missing all his life. He was about to discover that the greatest education doesn't come from business schools or boardrooms, but from the wisdom of people who have learned to find joy and meaning despite having every reason to despair. As Marcus prepared for the most important meeting of his life, he had no idea that Elena Martinez was preparing for a lesson in courage that would be just as transformative for her. Two people from opposite ends of the social spectrum were about to discover that the human heart recognizes no boundaries of class or wealth, and that sometimes the most profound connections are forged in the most unexpected circumstances. The stage was set for a conversation that would change both their lives forever, though neither of them could possibly imagine how far this simple encounter would take them. Marcus Wellington III was about to learn that true success couldn't be measured in dollars, and Elena Martinez was about to discover that her capacity for kindness had the power to transform even the most hardened heart. Their worlds were about to collide in a way that would prove that the greatest riches in life have nothing to do with money, and everything to do with the courage to see and be seen by another human being. Elena arrived at Wellington Enterprises at 5:30 a.m. the following Thursday, 17 minutes earlier than her usual schedule, though she couldn't explain why she felt compelled to start work sooner. She had spent the past 2 days in a state of quiet anxiety, wondering whether Marcus Wellington III had even noticed her birthday card, and, if he had, what his reaction might have been. The rational part of her mind insisted that a man of his stature probably received dozens of cards and well wishes, that her simple gesture would be lost among more impressive offerings from important business associates. But, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had shifted in her world since the morning she had placed that card on his desk. She found herself thinking about him during quiet moments at home, wondering what it would be like to carry the weight of so much responsibility, to make decisions that affected thousands of people, to live in a world where every relationship was complicated by questions of motive and advantage. As Elena pushed her cleaning cart through the marble lobby, she was unaware that Marcus Wellington III was already in the building, sitting in his office and watching the security monitors that showed the entrances and main corridors. He had been there since 4:45 a.m., consumed by nervous. Sometimes the smallest gestures carry the power to shatter the walls we build around ourselves. In a world where success is measured by bank accounts and corner offices, where human connection is often traded for profit margins, one woman's simple act of kindness would prove that the heart recognizes no social boundaries. This is the story of Elena Martinez, a struggling single mother working as a cleaning lady in one of Manhattan's most prestigious corporate towers, and Marcus Wellington III, a billionaire CEO who had forgotten what it meant to be human. What started as an ordinary Tuesday morning would become the catalyst for an extraordinary transformation. A birthday card, handmade, heartfelt, and placed on a mahogany desk by calloused hands, would bridge two worlds that seemed impossibly apart. It would remind a man who had everything that he had nothing at all, and show a woman who had nothing that she possessed something invaluable. This is not just a story about wealth and poverty, power and powerlessness. It's about the moment when two souls, separated by circumstance but united by humanity, discover that the greatest riches cannot be counted in dollars, and the most profound changes often come from the most unexpected places. Prepare to witness how a single act of genuine care can crack open the hardest of hearts and prove that sometimes, the people we overlook the most are the ones who can teach us everything about what truly matters. Get ready for a journey that will make you question everything you thought you knew about success, happiness, and the invisible threads that connect us all.